Catherine from Hot Springs is first up on the show. I'm 51 and have $750,000 and have an advisor, but after listening to your show for a while, I've realized there's not a plan for turning it into retirement income. It makes me nervous that I may not have enough. How do you know what to withdraw and when? Catherine, perfectly normal to be nervous if you do not have a plan. And I think that's the first thing that stands out to me is sometimes people who have an advisor, Janet, think they have a plan, but really don't. But Catherine here recognizes that she does not have a plan, and that's a big red flag.
There is a clear distinction in our minds, although many people don't see it, but there is a clear distinction between having a pool of investments and working with an advisor on what to buy and what to sell, as you're growing those assets, and having a written plan on paper, on purpose, that is going to help you determine what to sell when it comes time to take income. Scott, we're going to dive into some details on this and give some examples in just a moment that will be really pretty powerful in terms of understanding how important this is. Scott, I know you had a story about a client who had a very unusual question from his previous advisor.
Yeah, it is not all that uncommon. When people come to us, oftentimes they do not have a current advisor, but sometimes they do, and they are struggling with some of the things that they're dealing with that advisor. And I think withdrawal strategy, income planning, is a huge gap in the financial services industry. I had a client who came in and said that they had needed to make a withdrawal from their investments. And they asked the advisor to make that withdrawal for them. And the advisor actually asked them, what do you want to sell? Well, that's the advisor's job. That should not be the client's job. The advisor should be working on more than just investments. But unfortunately, Janet, that's the way it works, is the focus is on investments, and it might be a very good investment strategy. Might be very diversified, might be great, but will it stand the test of your retirement, pulling out withdrawals over a long period of time?
And unfortunately, it's really hard to know if you just have a withdrawal percentage, that you're using. And there is in this industry something called the 4% rule. We would call it a rule of thumb rather than a rule of thumb, because it's not how we're going to approach your retirement income at all. But let me walk through an example on this, and then we're going to look at some actual numbers of what would have occurred if you had retired at a couple of different points in history. But let me go back to 2008. I think everybody who is approaching retirement probably remembers that year quite well and what happened in the market. The market was down 40%. Now, to be clear, I'm not talking about anybody's particular plan, but if you had 100% of your assets in the S&P, which I hope you don't when you get to the point of retirement, but if you had 100% of your dollars invested in that way, this is what this would look like. And we're just using that as an example because it's really easy math to understand this concept. And frankly, it is what a lot of people do. They just have a pool of money and they're withdrawing a percentage from that pool of money, regardless of what that gives them in any given year in terms of performance. So for easy math, let's start with $1 million and say you have that invested and you're going to take this 4% withdrawal rate. So 4% off of $1 million means that you're withdrawing $40,000 a year. And everything's rolling along and life's fine until it's not. 2008 hits, the market is down 40%, so your $1 million is now no longer $1 million, it is now $600,000. So you have a choice to make. You can either continue the 4% withdrawal rate, but it would be 4% of $600,000 and therefore a withdrawal amount of $24,000. Or you can say, no, we're not going to take a pay decrease from $40,000 to $24,000. We're going to stick with the $40,000. Well, that $40,000 now is off of $600,000. So instead of a 4% withdrawal rate, it is a 6.7% withdrawal rate. Here's the math on that. The fact is you're going to run out of money if you go through the rest of retirement with this 6.7% withdrawal rate. There's no way to make that work. So we know that this doesn't work, but let's look at actual examples. We've got a graphic we're going to share with you, and the only difference between these two retirees is when they retired. So let's kind of set the stage here. One of them retires in 1966, one of them retires in 1976. They each retire with $500,000. They have a typical 60-40 scenario in terms of how their assets are allocated. And I'll say typical for the industry, not typical for GenWealth. And if you'll notice that in year one, Investor A, who retires in 1966, he has a negative return of 5.3%. Scott, you and I were talking about this before the show started. That's not like a horrifically bad return. It's not anywhere close to what investors saw in 2008.
Right.
And if you look at the worst year he actually saw was in 1974, and that was down 15%. But here's the key. This negative return happened in his first year of retirement, and he was also taking a distribution, and so you have the compounded effect of his withdrawal rate and the negative rate of return, and you'll see his balance never actually even touches, again, what he invested originally, as opposed to the person on the right, Investor B, who has a positive return in the first year, and then there's a slightly negative one. You'll see there are negative returns added into this over the years as well, but look at how much this person winds up with. They wind up with over 3 times as much as what they started with. At age 85, they've got $1.7 million, where Investor A at age 81 has run completely out of money. Scott, here's the point of this. We don't know what your sequence of return is going to be. We don't know if the first year in your retirement is going to be like a 1966 or a 1976, a 2008, or a really positive return. We don't know what that's going to be. So we have to build a plan that, Catherine, will work for you and your withdrawal regardless of what the investments are going to bring you in terms of return early in retirement.
So her question, how do you know what to withdraw and when? It needs to be more dynamic in terms of where you are actually taking your withdrawals from. It's not one pie. Your assets are not in one pool of money, but rather they are in segments or buckets, if you will, multiple accounts spread out over multiple investment strategies with a conservative strategy from the bucket you are currently pulling money from. Market risk is mostly, if not all, off the table in this bucket so that you can know if I'm pulling out $2,000 a month, that's going to happen because the value of that bucket is not going to be reduced while you're pulling it out. And then the risk increases a little bit for each bucket that you step out in time. So if you've got dollars allocated for a 5-year hold, you can take a little more risk. If you've got monies allocated for a 10-year hold before you use it, you can take a little bit more risk. And then the growth buckets, the equity buckets in the strategy are set to be 15 years and longer before you ever tap into them. So the idea here is if you have some of those negative returns in the equity market, like we showed you on that graphic, that they are not going to be, nothing will be sold because you are letting it grow for at least 15 years.
Scott, I think, I wish I'd thought about this in advance to check the date. If this is not dead on accurate, it's pretty close. I think that today is actually the 15-year anniversary of the low point in the market after 2008, because I believe it was on March 6th of 2009. If that wasn't it
was March.
It's very, yeah, it's
early.
March. It's early March. I think it was March 6th. But here's the point. If you had been in a bucketed strategy here at GenWealth during that period of time, it would not be until now that you would be getting into that later bucket of assets. And at this point, when you look at what, those growth-oriented investments, obviously they would have gone down in 2008, hit that low point in March of 2009, but now it's as though it never happened. And since you didn't have to take income from that bucket, it's had plenty of time to recover. Again, it's like it never happened.
About a 400% bounce since that low in March of 2009, 15 years ago. Here's the bottom line for Catherine and for everybody else listening who may be nervous that you don't have enough money for retirement. There is a Mass Mutual survey that we referenced in one of our other pieces a couple of weeks ago. And the survey asked, based on what you know today, how many years do you believe your income in retirement can sustain you? 36% of the respondents said 0 to 10 years. Now, they may not have saved enough for retirement. There may be no way around the fact that it's going to run out in 0 to 10 years. But how do they know that? Why do they think that? 27% answered 11 to 20 years. So said another way, 63% of the people who answered that question believe their money will run out in 20 years or less. That's why people are nervous and afraid if they have enough. I would say that most of the people that answered that survey don't have a specific retirement income plan.
Right.
It shows your monthly income from day one with cost of living adjustments over time. And Catherine, that's what I would suggest that you do, and you can reach out to us and get started in that process. We're going to, in the meantime, name your question the question of the week. And for that, Catherine, we'd love to send you a free Get Ready for the Future show tumbler for being the question of the week. Just send us an email to claim it. You can send it to show@getreadyforthefuture.com.